Okay, hello. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Lauren, and today I'm talking about some books on the human condition. I was looking up what this term actually means, and essentially it's a very general term, but it's kind of just an all-encompassing phrase for the human experience and the nature of being a human, both positive and negative impacts of that. Um, so it's very, very broad. And when I first looked up books on this topic, I feel like a lot of more analytical, non-fictiony style books came up, things like Sapiens and um, not like self-help books, but more like that memoir-y commentary style books of why do people do this, or what should you do with if a person is like that, or something like that. To me, that style of books is not super interesting, so I curated my own list of books that I think encompass the human condition. They're mostly genre, or they're mostly fiction books, and they all have this quieter elements to them. I feel like these are all quite soft books, even if serious, intense things happen in them. The way that they're written is very delicate. They all capture different kind of aspects of humanity, and most of them focus on the connections between people and other people, the connections between people on the earth, and this shared experience of being in a community. Most of them have kind of a hopeful element to them while still being really sad. Um, and a lot of them kind of talk about the dual nature of humanity, both the ugly, morally reprehensible, bad parts of humanity, while also highlighting some of the beauty in humanity and the goodness in people. And I think that kind of combination of the two elements is very, very interesting. It's much more interesting, I think, to read about than books that are just humans are bad. Here's some horrible things that humans did. See, they're bad. I think it's more interesting to talk about that kind of duality and to see that kind of all encompassing aspect of humanity. So I have 5 books to talk about. So let's just, I don't know, get into them. The first one that I have is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is the book that kind of started me thinking about the human condition, because I read a lot of reviews that are like, this book is about humanity, or it was blurbed. I don't know. I've read in a lot of places the way people talk about this book, they're like, this is humanity, the human experience. And I was like, what does that mean? And then I read this book and I was like, oh my God, this book is about the human experience. This book was written in 2014. Yes, 2014. And it's a pandemic novel. It follows a bunch of different characters who are somewhat kind of related in experience. And it follows them pre and post pandemic. And this pandemic was extremely deadly. It caused 90% of humans to die. So it brought about the end of the world, essentially. The main focus is on a group of Shakespearean actors and orchestra players who travel to different towns in this post-pandemic world and perform Shakespeare shows until they go to a town which is led by like a cult-like leader. You follow a lot of different characters, some more or less related to this group of people, and a significant amount of the book is just spent on them before the pandemic and their lives before and the connections that they had, their marriages, their friendships, their families. And something about it is just so beautiful. It's not an action packed story. So if you want an apocalyptic The Last of Us style story, this is not for you. And I think in essence, it raises a lot of questions about how people would work together in the end of the world. Like, if you're traveling on an airplane and you get grounded because a pandemic is ravaging the earth and you're stuck in the middle of some random place you've never been, what do you and the other passengers do? If all of your family members get sick and you don't, what do you do? I just really loved it. Again, I think it talked about like it does that balance really well of like the end of the world comes. Who are you? How do you react? What kind of person are you? And how do you work with others? How do you live with others when the world's falling apart? I think if you get easily bored reading books, you should not pick this up. It's not like very intense, and I do think it took me like 50 or 60 pages to get into it and really love it. If you want a book that feels like you're sitting out on a deck outside and it's 2 in the morning and there's nobody else around and you're staring up at the stars, you should read this book. The next book I'm recommending is I Who've Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This is a translated novel. It's translated from the French and it's a Belgian novel. It was first published in the 90s, and then I think it was only recently translated into English, which is why it has this like little resurgence. Now it's very popular on Book Talk lately. And I was actually very skeptical when I first heard about this book. I was like, not for me. The synopsis does not sound interesting. I don't know. But I checked it out from my library because so many people were recommending it. And it's so good. Probably one top 5 for me this year of books that I have read for sure. It's unlike anything I have ever read in my life. So here's the premise. It follows these 40 women who are trapped in a bunker underground. They are being guarded by these men with whips who instill these seemingly random rules, like they can't touch each other, even like hold hands and things like that. They do not remember how they got to the bunker and they don't know why they're there. One of the women is actually a child, teenager. I think she probably starts the novel at like 13, maybe. And she's very separated from the other women in the bunker because while they don't remember how they got to the bunker, they remember their lives beforehand and pieces of like regular world. And she doesn't because she was just a child. So she's often excluded from conversations. She feels very separate from these other women. So the focus is on her and her growing up kind of separated from humanity in like this sort of vacuum, essentially. And then you focus on her relationship with the other women and them all trying to work together to understand why they are where they are. I don't want to say more about the plot because I don't want to give anything away. The writing in this was so beautiful, and I think centering it on this woman who doesn't know about the way it used to be. She doesn't understand normal like society, and so she questions a lot of what she hears from the women. Why did you used to do that? Why do you act like that? And so it really becomes a question of like, what does it mean to be human? Do you need to have a society in order to be a human? It also really touches on what's a life well lived? What does it mean to live a well lived life? Can you live a well lived life separate from society, or is your life pointless? It's just such a unique concept and such a well done concept. It's a very short novel. It doesn't go on longer than it needs to. It's just like a breath of philosophy and wondering and questioning humanity. The next book I have is one of my favorites of all time, and it is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is obviously a super popular book, but in case you have not read it, here is another push to go pick it up. It is a environmental book with gorgeous, gorgeous writing. It's a blend of like nonfiction memoir style. It weaves together, braids, if you will, three strands of Kimmerer's life. One is her role as a botanist. A lot of it is details of plants and general facts about nature. The other aspect is her own personal stories with her family, her parents, and her children. And then the third strand is Indigenous wisdom and knowledge because she is an Indigenous woman. And so she weaves together these three strands to write a series of essays on humans and nature. I really think it's the blend of those two. And it is a shockingly hopeful novel. Not to say that she discounts the ways that humans have destroyed the earth, but this book is a great reminder of the fact that humans are a part of nature and are a part of the world. I feel like when you read a lot of other environmental books, you can feel really separate from nature, and you kind of feel like, oh, humanity should just end and give the world back because we've ruined it. And I think Kimmerer is like, no, that's the easy way out. You need to be a part of the world, and humans need to work to be members of this shared community in the world. The book starts with the story of the Sky Woman, which is an indigenous story of how the world began, and there is a perfect quote. Children hearing the Sky Woman's story from birth know in their bones the responsibility that flows between humans and the earth. I think that's what it is. A lot of the braiding metaphor comes through in the shared responsibility and the connection. I'll braid your hair if you braid mine. There's a lot of that in the way that she talks about humans and nature. It's the reciprocity. This one is just so gorgeous. I've read this book twice actually and studied it in undergrad both times, and I very much want to go back and completely annotate it because it's just stunning. I would say that if you are afraid of the climate disaster and you feel helpless and useless, read this book. My next book is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. This is a Swedish novel. It's technically a part of a trilogy, but you could read this book on its own, I think, and not feel like such a sense of loss if you don't feel like continuing on. Though I do recommend the other books in the trilogy. I think they're great. This book follows a small town called Beartown in kind of the more rural parts of Sweden. And this town is dedicated to hockey. It's kind of their main source of entertainment, of economic commerce, of tourism from other towns. And so a lot of their like daily lives center around hockey. And the high school team is projected to win the champion, which has major ramifications for the town in general. And they're all very excited about it. And then an incident occurs with the team and it tears the town apart. I don't want to say what the incident is because I feel like it gets a little spoilery, but you should maybe look up trigger warnings. Just up front, I want to say that this is not a sports novel. You don't like reading about sports or you know nothing about hockey, you do not need to in order to enjoy this book. It really doesn't talk a lot about the actual game itself. I mean, sometimes you might weave in like on a team you have to rely on your players and so like in real life you have to rely on people kind of a thing, but actual on the ice playtime does not happen very much in this book. And he writes it very clearly. You don't need to know about hockey in order to enjoy the scenes or the book overall. There is also another small town right next to Beartown, and they have kind of a rivalry with that town. So, in essence, this book like rips apart Beartown and shows the division between its members and kind of brings out the worst in people. Fredrik Backman writes with a lot of clarity and a lot of intention, and he writes with a lot of repetition as well. And it's to show kind of the connections between people's experiences, between the conversations people are having. And it highlights kind of the similarities that people on opposing sides of the event or opposing towns, the similarities that they have, as well as, and just like exacerbates that division between all of them. It is also very much about being brave, speaking up when others don't, how to stand up for yourself, how to stand up for others. And I think in essence, it's what does it mean to be a member of a community? How do you build a community? How do you form trust between people? This last one is the one that's most different from the other four books, and it's Elena Knows by Claudia Piñeiro. Piñeiro? It just started thundering. This is translated from the Spanish. It's an Argentinian novel. And it's different because it's much smaller in scope. The other ones focused more on more characters, on more people, and kind of a shared connection between community or just a large group of people. This one focuses on a mother and a daughter. The main character, Elena, is an older woman with Parkinson's. I'm pretty sure it's Parkinson's. And her daughter has just died. And everybody thinks that her daughter committed suicide, but Elena knows that she was murdered. And so you follow Elena attempting to travel across a city in order to call in an old debt from somebody from her past. to help her investigate and prove that her daughter did not commit suicide. This book is difficult to talk about. It's very heartbreaking. I remember it so clearly. There's a lot of books I enjoy but forget, but this one that has just stuck with me. Watching Elena deal with the difficulties of Parkinson's disease, timing her meds because of how long they'll last, taking the bus across town is a feat for her. And the descriptions that Piñeiro gives of how she manages it is heartbreaking and difficult and extremely well done. And it also focuses heavily on the mother-daughter relationship. As Elena is going across town, she thinks of her daughter, the way her daughter was, their interactions, their fights, their loves, their shared moments. It's just so special. Such a unique little story. I think how focused it is and how narrow its scope really elevates it. Just a fantastic in-depth dive into mother-daughter relationships. Those are the 5 books that I have. I'm sure there's dozens and dozens more, but I wanted to really give that specific theme of quiet, reflective novels on the human condition. Novels, books. So yeah, those are my recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, maybe consider giving me a like or a subscribe. Comments any books that you have that you think fit this description. I would love more recommendations. There's quite a few on my TBR that I think fit this genre, but I'll have to see after I finish them. So yeah, thank you so much. Bye.